The transcript was only 3 pages long. Typed, clean, official. On January 3, 1945, it began moving through Allied headquarters. It was a routine press briefing from Brussels, the kind that usually confirmed what everyone already knew and then disappeared into filing cabinets. Bernard Montgomery had stood in front of a microphone and spoken calmly about the Battle of the Bulge. He talked about discipline, control, and leadership. He described forces that did not panic when the front bent under pressure. He spoke as if the crisis had been managed, contained, and resolved by steady hands. The microphone didn't challenge him. The reporters didn't interrupt. The transcript recorded everything exactly as it was said. Hours later, those pages reached desks in Paris, London, and forward headquarters across Europe. Officers read them silently. Then they read them again. The words hadn't changed. The meaning had. The implication was clear enough to hurt. American units had broken. British leadership had steadied the line. Victory had been rescued by one side more than the other. No tanks were mentioned. No names were spoken. No units were singled out. But the message didn't need details to land. It was understood immediately by the men who had lived through the Bulge. The front line had survived the German offensive. The alliance was about to absorb a different kind of blow, carried not by artillery, but by paper. Bernard Montgomery believed the transcript told the truth. From his perspective, British forces on the northern shoulder had held firm. They had done exactly what they were supposed to do. They had remained organized while chaos threatened to spread across the front. Montgomery had always believed that wars were won by control, by preparation, by refusing to let emotion override structure. When he spoke to the press, he was reinforcing the identity he had carefully built throughout the war. Calm, methodical, reliable. To Montgomery, that deserved recognition. Dwight Eisenhower saw something else when the transcript crossed his desk. This wasn't a battlefield report meant for internal review. It was a public narrative, and once released, it could not be recalled or corrected in the same way orders could. Eisenhower understood coalition warfare better than anyone in Europe. Armies could recover from defeat. Divisions could be rebuilt. Equipment could be replaced. Alliances were more fragile. The Battle of the Bulge had been a shock. German armor had punched through thin lines and created panic across the front. American divisions had absorbed the first udar. They had been stretched, surprised, and pushed back in brutal winter conditions. Towns like Bastogne became symbols because American soldiers refused to break when they were surrounded, freezing, and nearly out of ammunition. They held not because the situation was controlled, but because surrender was not an option. Now those same men were being implied as the problem that needed fixing. Omar Bradley reacted with anger. His officers had buried their dead while someone else shaped the story. The transcript felt detached from the mud, blood, and exhaustion that American units had endured. George Patton reacted worse. To him, the transcript didn't feel like criticism, it felt like theft, not of glory, but of sacrifice. Words had been used to rearrange reality after the cost had already been paid. Montgomery wanted acknowledgement. Eisenhower wanted silence. Montgomery believed words could be managed after the fact. Eisenhower knew words were weapons once released, and this one had already fired. The microphone had done its work. Now Eisenhower had to decide whether to discipline a senior British commander publicly or swallow the insult to keep the alliance intact.
The consequences didn't explode. They seeped.
Copies of the transcript reached American units along the front. Officers read them aloud in command posts, quietly and unofficially. The reaction followed a familiar pattern: disbelief first, then anger. Men who had fought through snow and artillery listened as the war they remembered was reframed by someone who had not been there. Trust began to thin. Eisenhower summoned Montgomery. The conversation was tense but controlled. There was no shouting and no public reprimand. Eisenhower made it clear the briefing had crossed a line and endangered unity at a moment when unity mattered more than credit. But he stopped short of public discipline. That restraint had a cost. Montgomery issued clarifications but never fully withdrew the implication. The transcript remained the first draft of history, and corrections never traveled as far as headlines. What had been said could not be unsaid. Inside Allied headquarters, behavior changed. Press briefings were now treated like military operations. Statements were reviewed. Language was weighed. What could be said mattered as much as what could be done on the battlefield. The alliance survived, but it became brittle. The Battle of the Bulge tested the front line. The transcript tested the command. The war continued, but something essential was lost. Soldiers fight harder when they believe sacrifice is shared. When that belief cracks, even victory feels hollow. The Battle of the Bulge ended in Allied victory. Germany was pushed back. The gamble failed. The road east reopened, and the march toward the Rhine resumed. But the transcript left a scar history rarely lingers on. Montgomery won the press conference. He shaped the immediate story and walked away without punishment. Eisenhower won the war, but only by swallowing an insult his soldiers never forgot. The judgment is simple. Montgomery chose credit over caution. Eisenhower chose unity over discipline. Both decisions worked narrowly, but the microphone revealed a truth the battlefield did not. Alliances don't fracture under fire first. They fracture under words. And in January 1945, the Allies learned how close they had come to breaking not under enemy attack, but under a microphone.